Do 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 do.
Did you pay for that intro music?
I've always wondered if we should have intro music, so that was my test of
it. We should have intro music. That's for sure.
I kind of like the rawness of hitting record and then hitting stop.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is just like we're hanging out and talking, you know. So that is kind of true. Be curious what people think.
Yeah, I don't know. Tell us.
Yeah, tweet at us at Exit3 on Twitter. And what's yours?
JM Charnes.
JM Charnes. I always forget.
Jason Charnes was taken in 2009 when I joined, and I don't think it's tweeted since like 2009. But at this case, like, I'm so tied to JM Charnes that what are you gonna do?
Yeah, you can't do much about it at this point.
So I've been doing a lot of Rails this week, which feels like the first time in a while.
Yeah, well, you've been distracted with other things. So how's it feel getting back to things?
It feels pretty good. I started a new project this week. It's a side project, like around reviews for like small businesses, and it feels pretty good. Lately, when I fire up a new Rails project, like I kind of stick with the Rails way a whole lot, at least getting started, and like I kind of forget how good that feels. Because a lot of times, like when I'd start projects in the past, like I'd rip out mini tests, put in RSpec, then I would do like, it was a lot around testing the things I would change. But like, I've been just rolling with like fixtures and mini tests, and like my tests are fast, and like I'm iterating very fast, and I don't know, it just feels good.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I used to do the same thing, mini test and just go customize a bunch of stuff, and I thought that was great and whatever. And then over time I was like, hey, it'd be nice just not to have these other dependencies and things. And I was like, slowly growing into that too over the years. And I really just like the basics, like people are always like, oh, we're going to turn off CoffeeScript and do this and turn off turbolinks and blah, blah, blah. And they go through this whole process of setting up a new app. And I'm like, I don't know. The Rails basics aren't that bad. I don't really need CoffeeScript anymore because I really think ES6 pretty much covers everything that the CoffeeScript used to fix for us. But, I really, really like using fixtures because of how fast they are,
Yeah, so I actually seed my database with them. So
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so like I spend a little bit of time up front when I like create a new model and like kind of think about like for this project, it's me and another guy. He's actually not like programming on it, but like I was like, okay, I'll create a user for me and him, like just as dummy accounts. And like it's really nice because I don't have like a ton of data, but like that upfront cost, like defining your fixtures, means I can just blow away the database and bring it back pretty quickly. And like it's still the same data that I'm already like familiar with, which you can do with like seeds, I guess. But I don't know, something about that one place of fixtures.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, you are testing different data if you have seeds separate from your fixtures. So if you're using the exact same stuff in both places, that's the best thing you probably could do, right? Like you're going to be testing real data that'll be on the real website, which is exactly what your test should be doing. So it seems great that you reuse them in both places. Do you have to do anything special to set that up to use fixtures? Like, because normally they auto load or whatever when you run your test suite, but do you have to run do you put a loader in your seeds.rb file or something to load the fixtures for development, or how do you do that?
There's a rake task. It's just rake db fixtures load.
Okay.
And it just does it.
Easy.
And like, I don't know if it wipes away the database each time you do that, but like you don't end up with duplicates. So,
okay, that's great.
So you
Yeah,
can
I
pretty much
imagine it does wipe the database. I would imagine that's what happens in develop or in test, right? So it seems
it's been
logical.
really
Maybe it
nice
doesn't.
because like this early in the project, like I've only been working on it this week. I only have like 2 migrations, or excuse me, I only have like 2 models. But since I'm the only one working on the project and I'm just wiping away my database every time, I can actually just go edit the original migration without like having to create a ton of new migrations anytime I want to like add or change a field. And so
Yeah.
it kind of like, it looks like I've just like got what I want right away for migrations, but
Yeah, I do that actually, regardless, up until I deploy to production for the first time. So I will always go back and, truncate the database, drop the database and recreate it. If I'm, that very first time, I want to have all my migrations like well thought out. So that later on, I'm not dealing with, 400 migrations before we launch the product. That is awful. Because then, as soon as you hit production, you have real data. And so you have to use migrations that are incremental from there, because you can't blow away your production database, but you can up until that point. So I like doing the same thing, even if it's, just more manual. And I think I was going to mention that's like one of the big things I think people got attracted to MongoDB for was there is no migrations. You just say, hey, I want this attribute, and you get the attribute, and you don't have to do anything, which is the nice part about NoSQL or document stores. But you also don't have real like structure on the database. It's flexible. So it's a very different thing, but it does allow you to prototype things really, really fast. And that seemed to be a huge selling point when Mongo was getting big. I remember everybody using that. And then I tried it, in an app and was like, oh my God, I don't have to worry about migrations. And this is so nice when I'm like still trying to figure out what my database should look like. It's pretty great.
yeah, that reminds me, I actually have a follow up. So last week I talked about Smoked, the app I was working on, and how I use Firebase for it.
Yeah.
And I was kind of expressing my frustrations with NoSQL. And so when did we record? Last Friday? I guess it was Friday night or Saturday. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and like learn NoSQL better, because like clearly this works for a lot of people. Like I must not understand it. And so, turns out I didn't. I was Googling things like, how do people like handle relationships and things like that. It's a lot of like nesting. And so I actually watched like a Firebase. They had a video series on their document store. And it was like, what we do is if we have what I call a smoke, but we'll call a post. And then, you have likes. You just have a sub collection on smoke with all the likes. And so,
Yeah. People should imagine it like a hash, right?
right. And so,
Or an array of hashes or something.
But the thing about likes is I need like the user's information. So like specifically their username. So like you would store that in each individual like. And so for me, like I'm only accustomed to relational databases. So that's like a red flag to me, right? Like, how do I do that? And what if the user updates their username? And so the video is like, well, you actually will have to like run a query to go and find all those and update it. But they talked about how it is less expensive to do that than to try and essentially build that relationship in NoSQL, because a user updating their username will happen less than them actually liking stuff, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And it's the data structures like pros and cons basically that you're, dealing with at that point where, yeah, if you had a hash in Ruby and you had users underneath each one of these hashes, in order to change the username for some user, you'd have to do the exact same thing. That helped me wrap my head around it a lot when I was just thinking about it in terms of, okay, I have a hash or an array of hashes when I'm using Mongo. And yeah, like there's no such thing as joins, so you don't have the ability to be like, oh yeah, we join the users and we change the username in one place. And that's like really what relational databases are good at, is keeping one record of everything. They're not so great at, dynamic attributes and stuff. If you've ever had to do those and create a table where you have like key and a value, and you have like, okay, users have these extra attributes, and we have to have a name and a type and a value, and then this table ends up kind of collecting all these weird things. That's where relational databases like start to break down, which is why people were like, oh, we should try creating something that's focused around that, which is neat.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's cool just to learn it, like to actually understand it now instead of just writing it off, because like I'm still most comfortable with relational databases. Like that's what I use every day. But I don't know. It's just nice to like be able to see that point of view now.
Yeah. It's really, interesting to see another perspective like that on how to solve a problem of storing data. The thing is that most people got caught with is you don't know what Mongo is efficient at, and things, but sort of, because everything is kind of revolved around SQL, like MySQL, Postgres, that sort of stuff is very well understood on limitations and where things can go wrong. And a lot of startups got bit by, oh, we use Mongo, and then we hit some point that either Mongo themselves had never seen before, or we had structured our data wrong, and we had to redo everything because we did it poorly, which worked up until a point. And there's a lot of Hacker News posts and stuff about that, because it was like, yeah, you're using new technology that people haven't figured out all the sort of gotchas that you kind of just get for free using Postgres and stuff, because, Active Record guides you on how to set up a lot of things. And so you just kind of, especially like actually Basecamp was down this past week for like 5 hours because one of their tables had an integer primary key instead of a big int, and they crossed the like what was it, like 2 billion records or something?
Yeah, it's like 2.3 or something like that.
Yeah. So, they hit that number of records, and then this has been a thing fixed in Rails for 2 years now, as the default. So all your new tables start with a primary key that's an integer, but it's a big int now. But obviously, if you created your table before then, you wouldn't have this fix just like they did. So, we get a lot of those things kind of for free that we don't even have to think about in a database like Postgres or MySQL, which is one of the reasons why that's probably the right thing to use by default in most Rails apps.
Yeah, I agree. When you were talking about kind of like the cost of like doing certain lookups and things like that, the thing about Firebase too is that every request like is recorded, and like there's a free tier, but like, every request essentially costs money. And so if you try and set up like a NoSQL as a relational thing where like it has to do multiple lookups per like thing you want to have, that gets like really expensive really quick.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I only have like it's mostly just my friends using it, and there's probably like 100 cigars on there. And like, but there's a lot of likes, and then like each person is a user, like each person who's posted is a user, and each person who liked is a user. And so that adds up really quickly. So like I was working on it some this past weekend, and I just like in dev, I just essentially work against real data. because I don't know how to not do that with Firebase. But I'm using React, Create React app, which has like auto reloading. So like whenever I save a file, or I guess that's a Webpack thing, whenever I save a file, it'll reload. And I locked out the app because I hit my daily quota within like an hour.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So that's when I was like, clearly I don't know how NoSQL works.
That's pretty funny.
Anyway, I'm rambling now, but we were talking earlier. Oh yeah, so GoRails redesign looks great.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
I was wondering if you had told me and I forgot, and then you were like, "No, I just did it over a few days." So
yeah. I was having a conversation with one of my friends on Thursday, and for whatever reason, I got pretty inspired to go, change things on GoRails. So I bought a theme and then worked till 5 a.m. Friday night, I guess Saturday morning, and just continued working all weekend, and ended up launching it Wednesday, I think it was. And people seem to like it. I really thought it was a big improvement from where it was. I had hacked together. I don't really know how to design, and I had hacked together everything before myself. And so I was like, yeah, you know what? I should just do a real theme. And I know enough design that I can kind of mix and match features in a theme. I couldn't create a theme from scratch myself. And so I bought one, implemented it, did a lot of work to try and get everything moved over. It's still in Bootstrap. A lot of people asked if I was using Tailwind. I would have absolutely used Tailwind if it was a custom theme that I had bought. But one of the harder, more time-consuming things of using Tailwind right now is that there are no drop-downs, there's no modals. They're not just the same JavaScript libraries that you're pretty used to having if you've used Bootstrap. So you have to create those from scratch. I'm working on some of those for a different project, but GoRails is one of those things where I just needed to get the new theme done and live sooner than later, and it wouldn't benefit me too much from using Tailwind at the moment. But the cool thing was with that theme was actually very utility based for the CSS and the theme. So it had all these different little padding helpers and things that they use to extend Bootstrap. And so it turned out like it felt like I was using Tailwind, but with Bootstrap, which was pretty fun. So it didn't take me very long. I mean, I had a lot of pages to go through. There's a lot of, you pretty much edit every single view when you go modify your site with a new theme. It is a huge undertaking. And getting it done in under a week was pretty solid. So I'm excited about that.
It looks great. I like the remote Ruby shout out.
Yeah, I thought it was important that we had a thing on the definitely on the homepage, but I also put it in the footer because I felt like the podcast needs some more love, man.
Yeah, I'm terrible at like promoting it.
It's hard. We're developers, right? Like our thing is making stuff, not so much promoting things. So that's one of the things that, is my goal. I guess now that this year's almost over, it'll be more of a goal for next year, but really getting good at, doing more marketing and promoting stuff, I think. I've just always been bad at that.
This year is almost over.
What?
This year is almost over.
Dude, it snowed here today.
Really?
Yeah. We woke up and there was snow on the ground and like, come on. It's just the beginning of November. Come on.
I know it's getting cold, like it's getting wintry when my wife turns the heat on, because like I'm pretty much like we should never turn the heat on ever because I'm really warm natured.
Yeah, me too.
She knows that like she's pretty like respectful of that and is like, because she's kind of warm natured too, but like she gets to a point where she can't do it anymore. And so the heat's on in my house. I actually just turned it off because I'm home alone.
That's funny. Yeah, mine.
Um,
I'll notice when it's starting to get colder out because my cat will spend more time close to me.
there was a thing I want to go back to what you said just now, about like there are no drop downs in like Tailwind, and like I don't know if that's ever like a goal, but that is something like I actually ran into last night. So this like review app I'm building, like I was just doing an account drop down, and like before this point I had just been rocking with Tailwind. The utility based CSS is like, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's totally mine.
I think
I worked
I think people don't consider it their cup of tea because when you look at it for the first time, you're like, this is writing CSS classes that are literally one line of CSS. Why wouldn't I just write that line of CSS?
the amount of time I save, like not going between windows, writing custom classes, and like thinking about class names.
It's
Uh,
so great.
it's crazy. And like when a designer hands me something now, like a designer designed this project I'm working on, I can so much, like for some reason, I am so much better at getting the little details, like drop shadows, even like box shadowing. Like I can take like a sketch design and pretty much recreate it on the web for some reason better than I could when I was like writing a bunch of classes myself.
Well, I think part of it is like, you slap on the class of shadow, and then you're like, oh, that's not big enough. Shadow large. That's better. And like,
Right.
you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about any of the like, 6 parameters you got to use for box shadow, and then you also got to do, your box shadow WebKit and the one for Firefox and whatever. You have to continuously think about that stuff when you're writing CSS, and then you like when you're not using utilities. You have to remember, like, okay, this is nested inside of this other class, and I wrote my SCSS so that they're using nesting, but this is its own component, so it's over in this other file and whatever. And you have to constantly think about what you've named things, what they're nested under, what file they're in. And when you're using utilities-based CSS, you're just like in the browser, literally this div needs a shadow, so I'm going to put the shadow on the div. Done. And you see it right away, and you don't have to think about any of that stuff. It's so, so handy.
The other thing that's really nice is that like Tailwind specifically, because that's really the only one I like have worked with. Well, when I work with Bootstrap, for example, I don't usually customize Bootstrap. I usually just like use a CDN or something. But with Tailwind, like to fully take advantage of it, and they've got really good install docs. Like I run it with Webpacker, which is what anybody using Rails would probably do. But it uses Post CSS, right?
Uh-huh.
Which lets you like define class names and then use like at symbol apply and then apply other class names. It's like a way to like compose classes with other classes. And so like even like there's a couple of like weird spacing things that I need that like Tailwind doesn't have. And so it's easy for me to just like pull up a class and borrow from other utility classes they created.
Yeah. I've done that a bunch of times. I've also gone and Tailwind maybe doesn't have, so Tailwind ships with, for example, like margins. They have maybe 10 different sizes of margins, and maybe you need one, and they start out pretty small and get larger and larger over time. So you can add margin 1, margin 2, margin 3. Those are pretty small, but then margin 10 or 12 or whatever is large. And so like sometimes on the larger ones, you're like, I really need something in between these two. And you just open up the Tailwind config and you drop in your new margin 10 or 11. And there you go. You're off to the races. And I've found that super handy for, anything that kind of fits one of the Tailwind defaults. You could just run through really, really fast. But then when you're like, this doesn't really fit a Tailwind default, you just go add one and you're like, great, this is cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm totally sold on the approach right now.
I think one of the things people struggle with, sort of is like, okay, well, you wrote all this, all these classes, But how that seems unmaintainable, right? Because now you've got these classes that are just, every div has 5 or 10 classes on it. That seems really like a pain in the ass to maintain. And the answer is, yeah, if you leave it that way. But if you want to make things consistent, you just extract it and you make your own button class. Like you were saying, usually you use Bootstrap and you don't customize it. Tailwind doesn't come with buttons. It doesn't come with cards. It doesn't come with anything. And so you're required to design it from scratch, at least somewhat. And so then you pull out what's common about all your buttons and you make your own Bootstrap, which is awesome. And it doesn't take hardly any time to do that.
Yeah, it's great. And then like all of a sudden you just have these reusable classes that are just built of other Tailwind classes.
Yeah. Awesome. So this brings me to something I would like to release, hopefully soon, which is basically Bootstrap built on Tailwind. So basically, here's a bunch of cards and buttons and things that you could just copy into your project. And I'd like to include stimulus controllers. I've got stimulus controllers built for like modals, tabs, drop downs. I think that was the main ones. There may have been one other one.
You should share your drop down one with me because I wired up a stimulus Tailwind drop down last night and I would probably rather use yours.
Cool. Yeah. So this is interesting too, because these Tailwind components for stimulus that I've written, I tweeted about that, and actually Sam Stevenson from Basecamp emailed me about them and was like, "Hey, do you mind sharing those? Because I'd be curious to see how you're doing it, because we are adding some new stuff into stimulus to help work with your classes and things. Because a lot of times you're like toggling classes."
That's so great. Today I've written so much stimulus code that's like this dot some target class list contains or like class list add.
Yeah, exactly. So that's more or less what I was doing, but I was adding a class attribute onto. So for example, the drop downs, right? Like if you're using Tailwind, you won't have an active class. But if you're like doing a drop down in Bootstrap, you toggle the active class, which underlying, sets it to display block instead of display none or something. Right. So for my components, I have them set up so that you can customize the class that it toggles on and off. And so that way you can have these various different ways of reusing that component and never having to touch the JavaScript. That's my main goal, is that you never ever have to touch the stimulus controller. You just include it in your project and you define your data attributes in your HTML, and it will just magically work as a dropdown.
That's cool.
So I've seen some other ones that do dropdowns, but you gotta, customize their controller or inherit from it or something. And it's like, that's so wrong. Like it should be data attributes. It's a whole design like point of stimulus. So I'll share that with you, and then I'll probably just try and package those up. But the new stimulus improvements are a proposal for the upcoming 1.2 release. So they've got a pull request open on the stimulus repo with the proposal for the API for these changes. And I'm going to try to, I guess maybe I'll publish what I've got right now because I know they work, but then I will also take a look at these and see how they get improved by using like the new API, because I'll be really curious to see if it cleans up some things. Because there was some stuff that was like, you have a modal that's open. Modals are annoying. There's probably bugs with my modal, but
there's probably bugs with every modal.
Modals are, I started to look at the source code for Bootstrap's modal, and it's like hundreds of lines of code, and I'm like, oh god. And it's ridiculous because like you have a modal and you display position fixed. CSS does a great job of, here's an overlay that you can put on your page, and then you can print your modal on top of that, and it's all great. But then you can scroll the background still. You're like, well, I need to disable that. And so you like, set overflow hidden on the body, but then that disables the scroll bar in your browser, which is different widths on the Mac, on Windows, on Linux. And so then your page shifts over by 12 pixels here, 16 pixels on a different operating system, whatever. So you got to then go and calculate the width of the scroll bar and add padding to the body or whatever to correct for that, so your page doesn't move. And that's all just to like open the modal, and there's other problems with that too. And then you've got to, if you click on the background, like the overlay, you should close the modal, and then the button should close the modal. But if you click on the background of the modal itself, you shouldn't close it. It's a pain. And I'm sure that's overlooking a bunch of like edge cases too that I hadn't run into yet. So
my anxiety just like went through the roof.
Yeah. So maybe
just listening to you talk.
Maybe I'll get these packages uploaded to NPM, and then other people can fix the bugs for me.
You could also drop it on Stim. Awesome.
Yeah, Steven said he was going to be working on that some more too, which is awesome.
I keep checking that side out. There's been a couple more that's added. So like,
cool. I'm gonna have to check those out too.
Stimulus has really grown on me because I was kind of skeptical at first.
The first time I used it and Stimulus, actually, it's funny. Stimulus and Tailwind feel very similar in you read about them and you're like, I don't know, that doesn't seem so good. And then you try them and you're like, ooh, this is interesting.
I'm pretty bullish on React. Not like I'm
on you.
I'm not like
for life.
Do what?
Vue.js for life, man.
Oh, get out of here. So like I'm not like SPA all the things. And like I really don't mind JavaScript frameworks except for Angular.
I think that's fairly common these days, yeah.
It's just not talking about cups of tea. Angular's not mine. Like it's like Vue, React, React, Vue, jQuery, Internet Explorer 8, and then maybe I'll consider Angular. But yeah, so this week at work, I was working on a project, and it's using a lot of like Rails Vue.js, the unobtrusive JavaScript. And if anyone's not familiar with that, it's essentially like you can request JavaScript back from the server. And so you have like a ERB file that's specific to JavaScript, and it'll like execute the JavaScript when you get the response back. And it works like really well for what this page was doing, except I need to expand it now. And that introduced like a lot of complexity. And so like I was like, well, I'll try this in Stimulus, but I didn't really understand Stimulus still. Like I've used it, but like it hadn't clicked before. So kind of like you said earlier, like I wasn't dealing so much with data attributes. I was thinking of it in terms of like a jQuery almost, where I was like looking for DOM elements. And so I actually like coded up a couple of components in React and like took it to the team. I was like, I know this is like, we don't have any React code. I was like, I know this is like a kind of shocking thing. And then like, because I don't know, I don't think many people had like worked on React. So like, if you've never worked on it, you look at it for the first time, it's kind of a brain shift. But anyway, somebody, one of my coworkers, Greg, was like, like this is cool, but like, this seems like what Stimulus was designed for, what you're doing. And I was like, it didn't click with me yet. And so last night I sat down and like really like embraced the Stimulus on my side project, and it like clicked. And today I've just been rocking with Stimulus at work. So
that's great, man. Yeah. I found it the most intuitive thing that I've used in JavaScript probably ever, to be honest. And especially if you have any sort of understanding of jQuery, it's kind of a lot of what jQuery did, just without any of the jQuery. And you don't have to. The probably my favorite part about all this that a lot of people don't talk about is those mutation observers, which are sort of like these. Instead of writing selectors that run once and attach event listeners, these are kind of like selectors that are always running and always monitoring the page. So then you get the benefits of, if you write your JavaScript with Stimulus, any TurboLink stuff, you don't have to do any special TurboLinks things for. So you don't have to wait until TurboLinks load event and then set up everything and redo it next page view. This stuff just works on the next page, and you didn't have to reload any JavaScript. It's so awesome.
Yeah, the more I understand it, like that, the problem before I think was my ignorance, right? That's clearly my problem with everything. No SQL, Stimulus.
That's the hard part about, all this stuff is like, same with Hatchbox users, like they like using it because they don't understand all of the stuff that it takes to set up and maintain their own server. And there's a heck of a lot of stuff. Even, it comes down to as simple as you didn't realize that this symlink was being set up in a certain way. And so because you had a file with the same, or a folder with the same name, it causes the symlink to go inside the folder instead of replacing the folder. And you have to like have your head wrapped around sort of the concepts, and that's like usually the hardest part because you want to just jump in and use something. But if you got to stop and be like, okay, we got to learn MVC before we can use Rails correctly, it's very hard to just skip that,
Yeah.
So how do you feel about, like, have you wrapped your head around Stimulus then?
Yeah, like night and day from yesterday. I don't want to say like I've mastered it, but like there's not too much to it, right?
Right. Yeah,
there's targets.
Once you like have that epiphany moment, it's mostly just learning the nuances of how it works after that, I feel like.
Yeah. So like the thing I've been working on at work is like comments. So like, we have memberships, and you can somebody who like runs the membership can post, and the subscribers can like see the post and comment on them.
Sure.
And so comments have likes. And so like the thing I was working on today was like I made a like controller, and but the problem was like I put it at the top of the container that holds all the comments. So like I couldn't just like go get a single, like if I clicked a like on like a comment 2 down, like it, when I say like targets, it's all of them still. And so then I was like, that was the epiphany. I was like, oh, I can just make a controller for each individual one of these. And then I don't have to do any like DOM manipulation, or sorry, like DOM, like query selecting.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Like you had it set up so that originally your likes stimulus controller was applied to the entire comment section instead of every individual comment. Is that right?
Right. So like at first I was like, this is stupid. Like I have to like query. So I like have to set like data IDs and then query by that to try and do this. Like this is worthless.
Yeah. And then almost not like it's almost as if you weren't using stimulus at all at that point. Right.
Yeah. I was like, I don't get it. And then like I moved it down a level, and I had data targets for everything. And I was like, this is perfect. Like it just clicked. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the worst.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. And there may be like a case where you would want to have it around the entire comment section. Like if you wanted to display the total number of likes of all of the comments somewhere, that might be weird. Or maybe you just want to display the total number of comments up top or something. I don't know. You may want to do that, but then like, you probably can also do sub items as well, and because I think you can. There's a cool thing. I haven't done this too much about having a stimulus controller talk to another one. there's a way to do it. And so like, because normally you're working inside of a stimulus controller, like stimulus picked up some activity, like you clicked on the like button and then it fires a function. You can actually like through JavaScript trigger that function manually. I've never done it, but I've tried to look into it before. And so you can do like really complicated stuff with it too, which is pretty neat. I haven't had much of a need to do that yet though.
Yeah, please don't boggle my mind right now. I'm fragile right now.
Blown.
Well,
last thing I was going to mention this week was it looks like, and I don't remember, I haven't really kept up with the previews of Ruby 2.6, which, as a reminder, comes out hopefully Christmas this year. Like every year, the new Ruby version comes out about Christmas time. But this version 2.6 preview 3 looks like it has the first implementation of the just-in-time compiler, which is an exciting improvement. And it's 1.7 times faster performance than Ruby 2.5 on CPU-intensive, non-trivial benchmark called OptCarrot. So that's a huge improvement. I'm excited to try this out.
Yeah, I didn't look too much into it. I just saw it in passing. I think it was like Mike Parham tweeted or somebody that like in testing Sidekick with it, it was like 25% slower right now though.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm sure it depends on the type of work that's being done.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I haven't looked at it at all. That's just like things I saw in passing.
Yeah, but also, I mean, Sidekick is ultra fast. Like, it's probably pretty well optimized for the current version of Ruby. So,
Sidekick's the freaking best, man. Mike deserves every dollar.
Dude, he seriously does.
I wish that I had $1,000 a year laying around just to give him. Like,
I agree. Sidekick has been, I mean, for all the projects I've used Sidekick on for free, it's been leaps and bounds better than anything else that I've used. And I've even gone from, at first I used Sidekick through Active Job because I was like, oh, this is great. We'll make it compatible with everything. I'll write my jobs so that, for whatever reason in the future, if I wanted to replace Sidekick, I could skip Active Job. And then I got looking at how fast Sidekick is if you just skip Active Job. And then I was like, oh, good Lord, this is really crazy. So for most of my Hatchbox jobs, I switch them just to use Sidekick directly and like inherit from that instead of Active Job. And so yeah, you just get like a big speed improvement skipping Active Job, I guess. I'm not really sure why that is exactly. I wouldn't imagine Active Job wouldn't have to do much, but there must be things that can be sped up in there or something that currently aren't.
Well, I think that wraps up everything I had. I don't know if you got anything else.
Nope, that is it. I'm excited if you guys want to check out the new GoRails website and tweet at me and let me know what you think. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you guys run into any bugs, any major theme rewrite like that runs into a few things here and there. So let me know. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. And if you have any suggestions, let me know.
I have one thing I want to try. If you have made it this far in listening and are interested in Elixir at all, I have 4 sets of Elixir flashcards. So you can Google them. There's these flashcards that are like front and back, like question answer. I am not doing any Elixir right now. I don't necessarily see it a lot in my future either. So I have 4. I have enum 1, kernel 1, fundamentals 1 and 2, and I will give these away if somebody wants to tweet me that they want this. First person that does, you just have to pay for the shipping, which shouldn't be too expensive.
Nice. So they should tweet you and you'll DM them or whatever for the details?
Yeah, tweet me. You can DM me. I have my DMs open. JM Charns.
Slip into those DMs.
Yeah, dude, just chilling. I have 4 Elixir flashcards. I will give these away because I don't want to throw them away. That makes me sad.
Sweet. Yeah, I should go find. I'm sure I have some Ruby books that I haven't read in a long time. I should go find some and give those away. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Man, good to catch up. JM Charns, Exid3.
Yep. On Twitter, on Gmail, on .com, you name it.
MySpace.
Mine's always consistent.
Awesome. Well, man, have a good week. I'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Have a good weekend, everybody.